Jurassic Park Operation Genesis still looms large in my heart, and I'm sure in the hearts of many of you watching this video at home. Despite the game turning 20 years old this year, it still regularly makes the top few of most people's favourite dinosaur games list. Though given the quality in the genre, maybe that's not particularly high praise. Still, despite its age and the recent availability of more advanced park builders, people are still enjoying JPOG to this day, even going so far as to make incredible new mods and some slightly stranger mods as recently as this very year. When lifted out of the haze of nostalgia though, it's a flawed game to say the least. The start of the game is oppressively slow, and on the playthrough I did for the purpose of this video, I found it to be incredibly tedious despite giving myself 10 times the starting funds you would usually get. The grid system the game is built on is very constrictive, limiting everything from fence placement to the shape of your lakes and ponds, and ensuring every park ends up looking somewhat the same. There's no decorations to speak of, and you can only place a limited number of items, and the dinosaur roster is massively cut down and not even all accessible in vanilla versions of the game, as you're limited to only 5 dig sites. Now, JPOG was made with the best of intentions, but it suffered a fairly torrid time in a very short development span, and they had a lot of fantastic ideas that never quite made it into the final build. If you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend Luca's absolutely fantastic Genesis Archives website and its cut content section. I'll link that down below. Despite all this, I adore the game and it's still in my top 5 dinosaur games ever made. It's got an incredible score and it scratches that nostalgic original Jurassic Park itch like very few games ever have. It's largely been supplanted now by the increasingly fantastic Jurassic World Evolution 2, in my opinion, probably now the best dinosaur game you can spend your time with, but there's still things the newer title can pluck from the original Operation Genesis, and that's what we're going to discuss for the rest of this video. The first and most obvious for most of you at home, I suspect, is the island building. In both the main campaign and Site B, we'll get to that in a moment, you're able to customize the island you build on. From the amount of trees, to the squareness of the shape of the island itself, to the number of rivers and number of mountains, it's a pretty limited selection, but it goes some way to offsetting the repetition of the campaign and allows you to challenge yourself with particularly tricky island builds. If Evolution 2 could give us a legitimate island build, so far most of the maps in Evolution 2 are surrounded with at least a little bit of land, but this could massively extend the shelf life of the game, especially given the game's far more advanced technology. I mentioned Site B earlier. Now this is a pretty bare bones mode in JPOG wherein you make your island and then you're plonked down with unlimited funds and a limited building roster. You're only making hatcheries and feeders really, and the idea is to fill your island with dinosaurs and watch the ecosystem play out. JPOG's reliance on herbivore feeders limits how natural you can make the island, something Evolution 2 has already fixed in the sequel, but the major limiting factor is the lack of auto hatcheries. Eventually, your herbivores are going to be depleted, but if we could resupply them with hatcheries that track the number of dinosaurs you have, much like Cryogenics mod, then we'd be pretty close to a legit Site B mode in Evolution 2. You can basically match JPOG Site B mode already in Evolution 2 Sandbox mode, but a dedicated mode for it with those auto-respawning dinosaurs and more wild dinosaurs would go a long way. Even more than the island building though, the big advantage JPOG has over Evolution 2 is nothing to do with the dinosaurs or the land you build on, in my opinion. It's actually the guests. Now Evolution 2 has added the umbrellas that guests can utilize during the rain, but JPOG's guests have other advantages as well. If you research and buy a souvenir shop, the guests will go inside, they'll shop, and they'll emerge with a Jurassic Park themed balloon. Every guest has a name, a location they're from, a type of personality, a view on the park, and a list of dinosaurs they've seen. Now not all of this is necessary, Evolution 2 does provide a lot of this information via graphs and such instead, but the names and the tactile visible approach to shopping grounds the guests in reality much more than the walking algorithms of Jurassic World Evolution 2. Some of my very best times with JPOG have been releasing my carnivorous dinosaurs and tracking my various named guests as they get hunted down, often betting with some of you at home during our playthroughs as to who would be the last to survive. Evolution 2's guests never offer this much personality and thus are a lot harder to care about. A very quick note on attractions, this was more a thing in the past when the viewing dome hadn't been brought across, but with that addition there's only one missing from Evolution 2, the balloon tour. I'm not saying everything from JPOG has to make it to Evolution 2, but this is one that I definitely do want, and I have been harping on about the need for an airborne tour for a long time now, so I don't want to hammer the point any more relentlessly. But not only do those tours offer some much needed verticality to our parks, they offer views you simply aren't going to get unless manually flying around in your helicopter, which isn't really the same thing. Evo 2 is definitely better in this regard than JPOG, with lagoons and log viewing galleries and aviaries and zip lines. It's just missing that one last item, or at least type of item, that I would love to see brought across from the older game. This penultimate choice may be a little controversial, but I talked about this all the way back in 2018 when the first Evolution came out, and it does hold up today in my opinion. Twisters just aren't very scary in Evolution 2. They're incredible visually, but they hit like a big wet noodle. In JPOG, a twister was a devastating force of nature that would kill not only your small dinosaurs, flinging them around the park, but it would tear up your guests and kill them too, much like in, well, Twister, my beloved. In Evo 2, they don't hurt guests at all, and I understand why given how annoying it could be, but games need to be annoying and frustrating and devastating sometimes. This should be the very worst thing that can happen to your park. And at the moment, it just isn't. Finally then, we have the missions, though we can extend this to general gameplay variety. Now on some level, Evo 2 is much better at this than JPOG. The level of micromanagement and the addition of tons of decorations means there's usually a lot more to do minute to minute in Evolution 2. But in terms of fundamental gameplay loops and options, I'm not so sure that's true. Now Evolution 2 has added some of these features via the mustering with the Dominion DLC and the photo campaign mission, but it really lacks a dedicated space to try these out. I don't know about you folks at home, but I've literally never used the mustering since that campaign mission. These JPOG missions with their time limits and their mini stories are a really cool way to try out using lures or mustering or your shooting skills without having to fabricate these situations yourself. They're a great break from the main game, and given Evolution 2's modernity, we could throw some leaderboards onto these, and I know I'd throw quite a few hours into trying to save the President of Dragovia once again, faster than everybody else. And that's it for the list. Though a shout out to JPOG's soundtrack, which reigns supreme as the best Jurassic soundtrack in my opinion in the entire franchise, including the original film with its absolutely gorgeous take on that classical theme. I don't want this video to be misconstrued. As much as I adore JPOG, I do think Evolution 2 is a substantially better game, but it owes a lot of its base systems, the fossil hunting in particular, to that older title, showing there's always something to learn from games that might otherwise be dismissed as outdated or unimportant. JPOG looms large in the hearts of many, even 20 years later, and I'd hate to see it forgotten over time as newer generations take to this franchise. If you can stomach the slow opening hour or so, and you've got some love for the original Jurassic Park, this is absolutely still a game worth your time and your attention. I didn't really intend this video to devolve into a love letter to JPOG, but I'm sitting here as I write this script listening to the soundtrack and it's hard not to. I'm going to link that full soundtrack down below thanks to Warpath's video. Give it a listen. Thank you for joining me folks. Cheers, much love, as always. Bye bye.